The hour of 7 o'clock having arrived, I'll call the council to order. Let the roll reflect that all council members are present with the exception of Councilmember Balsanic. A quorum has been established. First thing we're going to do tonight is first have a proclamation declaring July 7th, 2017 as Larry Hammond Day in the city of Hastings, and I'd like to ask the Hammond family to come meet me over at the podium. Nice to meet you. Come on over so people can see you on TV. Last year, unfortunately, Larry Hammond passed away, and he was a noted member of our community. And we wanted to be able to recognize him this year and have his own day recognized in the great city of Hastings. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with Councilmember Brox to read the proclamation in his honor. Councilmember Brox, can you lead us into this proclamation?
Whereas Larry Hammond was born July 7th, 1948, and
whereas Larry Hammond graduated from Hastings High School and lettered all 4 years in wrestling, and
whereas Larry Hammond was proud of his military service. He served in the Army from 1968 to 1971. He was awarded the Bronze Star 3 times for heroic services in Vietnam. He served in the Minnesota National Guard from 1976 to 1994, and
whereas Larry Hammond was a postal carrier for 32 dedicated years, and
whereas Larry Hammond passed away July 25th, 2016, and whereas Larry Hammond was a proud American hero, father, grandfather, great-grandfather, and a devoted husband, and he demonstrated a great love for his family and the Hastings community, and
now therefore be it resolved. I, Paul Hicks, Mayor of the City of Hastings, do hereby proclaim July 7th, 2017 as Larry Hammond Day in the great city of Hastings. Congratulations, and please say a few words for Larry. Come up here and say something.
Thank you to everything. Larry was very proud of what he did in his community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Next, I'm going to call on Chief Shute. We have a retirement coming up shortly, and this is a very dedicated firefighter that's going to be retiring from our ranks here shortly, and we'll take a few minutes to recognize him. Chief, I turn it over to you, and welcome to the meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, City Council members. This coming week marks the end of an era at the fire department with the upcoming retirement of Captain Tom Murray. Tom joined the fire department as a paid-on-call firefighter in 1985. In 1990, he was promoted to full-time fire engineer, and in 2015, he was promoted to captain. Over the years, Tom has served numerous positions within our organization, EMS training coordinator for a number of years, CPR instructor coordinator, advanced critical life support instructor for our department, just to name a few. But I think most notably, Tom has been known for fire prevention in our community. And when you think of fire prevention, a lot of kids will remember Tom Murray. And I want to say he's instructed thousands of our youth in our community, and that's something I'm very proud of. Some, I would like to say, that have gone on to become firefighters at Tom's urging in their younger days. So, Tom, I want to thank you for that. I want to thank Beth and your family for all the countless hours that you were taken away from your family to do your job on the holidays and on the weekends. It means a lot to myself. It means a lot to our community, and it's been a pleasure working with you, Tom. This Thursday, we're going to have a reception at the fire department from 3 to 6 p.m. The public is invited to stop by and offer Tom some well wishes, and this Thursday will be his last 24-hour shift, or last shift at the fire department. So, Captain, I want to thank you. Thank you.
Captain, you got to say something. Come on, I know you're a talker. Okay. Thank you, Tom, for your service to this community. It's been valued, and we appreciate everything you've done in your past 34 years of service.
32 years.
32 years of service, so thank you, and please take a moment to say a few words.
Well, I appreciate that, Mr. Mayor and Council. It's been a great run. It's been a great city to work for, and I appreciate the support of the group in the back of the room here, the ones that have been before me, the ones that are here now, and the ones that will follow me. The support early on of my parents when I was still living at home in Vermillion, and they still live in Vermillion, so look for the hostas when you drive by. And then the last 25 years of the support that I've gotten from my wife, Beth, and she's been my rock. She's the one that has to see me go away in the middle of the night, see me come back in the middle of the night, usually a lot dirtier than when I left. So, but it's been a great run, and I'm truly proud to have served, and it's been my honor. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you. Okay, Council, next is the approval of the minutes. First, we have this special city council meeting of June 2nd, 2017. Was there any additions or corrections to that minute, to the minutes of that meeting? Okay, they stand approved. Next, we have the regular city council meeting of June 5th, 2017. I understand we may have an error. Councilmember Fulch.
Yes, Your Honor, I would like to point out a correction on the third page under, midway in the page, the Leduc operating agreement, that Fulch requested that this item be referred to the administrative committee for discussion, and you did pass that on.
Yes.
The administrative committee.
Okay. We'll have the,
Connection.
we'll have those minutes corrected to reflect the true action. Okay?
Sure. And then a second item underneath Resolution 060517, supporting application to Minnesota Management and Budget for the capital budget process. Just a correction that I had also requested that the actual application be shared with the council because the financials were missing from the packet. And so I'd just like to have that correction also made to the meeting minutes.
Okay, is there any objection? Okay, the minutes are before us as amended. Is there any other observations? Seeing none, those minutes are now adopted. Council items to be considered. Any council items to be considered? Seeing none, consent agenda. Melanie?
Your Honor and Council, you have before you a resolution for appointing hearing officers for dangerous dog appeals. When we sent out the packet last week, we did not have confirmation on who those appointees would be. Staff is recommending that Trinity Augustin, Russ Roloff, and Brian Ashman be the hearing primary, secondary, and tertiary hearing officers. That's based on the recommendation from the Public Safety Advisory Commission. Happy to stand for any questions.
Is there a motion to put that on the consent calendar? Councilmember Vaughn makes that motion, seconded by Councilmember Fulch. That motion, is there further discussion to that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of that motion, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. That motion is approved. We have the consent agenda before us as amended. Councilmember Vaughn makes a motion to approve, seconded by Councilmember Liefeld. Any discussion to that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of that motion, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion prevails. Next, under awarding of a contracts, a public hearing, we have a public hearing in regards to the amended sidewalk cafe license and liquor license amendment to Lock and Dam Eatery. And Julie, are you going to speak to that?
Yep, Council, you are requested to conduct a public hearing to consider a sidewalk cafe and liquor license amendment for Lock and Dam Eatery. Lock and Dam is expanding their sidewalk cafe and was granted conditional approval at a special city council meeting on June 2nd.
Okay, I'm going to open up the public hearing. Public hearing is now open. Is there anyone here who's like to speak in regards to the amended sidewalk cafe license and liquor license for the Lock and Dam Eatery downtown? Okay, anyone here want to speak to that issue? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. Council, what's your wish? Councilmember Fulch? Councilmember Fulch makes a motion to approve, seconded by Councilmember Brox. That motion is now before the body. Is there any further discussion to that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of that motion say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion prevails. Next, we have a public hearing in regards to an ordinance amendment for off-sale liquor sales on Sunday. A lot of people know that the legislature last spring passed the off-sale liquor sales on Sundays, and this is to bring our city code up to the state law. Julie, you want to speak? Is that, Dan, will you take that over, please?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. As Mayor, you indicated, the legislature changed the laws that would allow for off-sales of liquor from 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. on Sundays. The proposed ordinance amendment would allow those sales to occur in the city of Hastings on those same dates and times. Anything else that's in the memo, I can stand for any comments on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dan, for that presentation. I will open up the public hearing. The public hearing is now open. Is there anyone here who would like to speak to that issue? Sunday sales at the liquor store. Okay. Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. Council, that issue is before us. What's your wish? Councilmember Brock makes a motion to approve, seconded by Councilmember Vaughn. That motion is now before the body. Is there further discussion to that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of that motion say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion prevails. Next, we have a public hearing in regards to the sexual offenders and sexual predators ordinance that's before us this evening. I'm going to call on Chief Schaefer to give the presentation. And Chief, welcome to the meeting. We're very glad to have you here, and I want to thank all who are here for this discussion. We thank you for being here. You're valued, and your opinions are valued, so thank you very much. Chief Schaefer.
Thank you, Your Honor, and City Council. As I try and get this up here. Tonight, at the request of the Public Safety Commission and the City Administrator, we're just going to give a little background information on the sexual offender and sexual predators ordinance. What I'm going to cover here in the next couple of minutes is simply a bit of a review of what some of you may have seen, what the audience has seen, and some of the council members have seen as part of some of our community meetings. Again, this is about educating our community as to who sexual offenders are, what their requirements are, and how we as a city deal with level 3 offenders when they come into our city. So first of all, in July 1st of 1991, the Sexual Offender Registration Program was enacted by the state of Minnesota, and it's administered by the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. Registration overall is required if an offender is convicted, charged, or adjudicated delinquent for specific crimes. Those crimes include criminal sexual conduct, indecent exposure, any sexual conduct involving a minor, kidnapping, and false imprisonment. Contents of the registration include, and this is when they report to our office, contents of the registration include address, employment, school, vocation, and vehicles. Level 1, Level 2, and Level 3 are all required to report this information to the Hastings Police Department, while for clarification, the Level 3 is the only one, as we get into this, that we have a public notification of all the particulars. Of course, we cannot divulge the address of that individual. The community notification for Level 3, this was established in 1997, and this was the statute which required us to come before the community and have a public meeting. This covered predatory offenders who were released from prison, predatory offenders from other states or federal jurisdictions who were released from prison, and civilly committed offenders. Level 3, remember I said there's Level 1, Level 2, Level 3, Level 3 being the highest risk offender. That again requires broad public notification, as many of you have attended in our previous offenders. Department of Corrections Level 3 public website, it's posted on that website. We have the public notification meeting. The media, newspaper, television, social media, and door-to-door flyers are all part of the reporting or notification process. Since 2015, we've had 2 Level 3 offenders have relocated to Hastings. One, the most recent offender, was released from the Department of Corrections And the one predatory offender that we had last year was one that was released from the Minnesota Department of Health, or in other words, it was someone who was civilly committed. So those are the two that we have in our community and currently have in our community. Our notification process, we are typically notified by the Department of Corrections or the Department of Health, usually about 90 days or more in advance of somebody being released or anticipated release. As a police department, we sit down and we decide and try and schedule and announce a public meeting. We, again, use Facebook, we use press releases, we make the entire packet available to the public to view on our webpage. We mail notices to all schools, licensed daycares in the city. Our rule, as we've followed, many other agencies do the same, and that is we notify people that live within or approximately half a mile of the intended area of where the person will reside, and that also includes downtown businesses. Depending on the offender, there may be other places that we release this information to, but generally that's where we start. And of course, we notify all area law enforcement and the county attorney's office. The other cities around us also do the same. When they have a new offender moving into their community, we are notified as well. We've had a number of conversations. We had the Jacob Wetterling Foundation. We had folks from the Department of Corrections that share this information with us. And this is just a reminder as we move into, before we move into the public hearing tonight. The criminal sexual conduct convictions in Minnesota between 2000 and 2014, 7% of the total offenders had a prior sexual conduct or prior offense, or 93% had no prior convictions whatsoever. The victim-offender relationship, again, we shared this with you. About 86 or nearly 90% of the offenders either were an acquaintance or a family member to the victim. So the folks, we're only looking at 14, I don't want to say only, but we're looking at 14% of the sexual assaults that occurred are people that are not known to the victim. Recidivism. As you recall, in 1991, we started registration. 1997, level 3 registration. So as streamlined since we've required registration for level 3s, see that overall recidivism of sex offenders about 2.5%. So 2.5% of all offenders recommit. And then I'll turn it over to Dan Flegel to discuss some particulars of the ordinance.
Chief, I was asked to comment on a couple components of the ordinance, and including the similarities or differences between the peer communities that we looked at, as well as a few comments on the distance requirements that tend to be in these ordinances. Generally, there are now 100 or more of these ordinances in effect in the state of Minnesota. They all tend to follow a general flow, and that is to include the reasons for adopting these ordinances, which is to keep people and children safe in the community, some definitions that define the types of people that are registered and required to comply with the ordinance, and then the different types of locations that are identified in the ordinance so that the distance requirements that apply to those. Most of the ordinances that we looked at also had some restrictions on the ability to lease property, as these individuals may be coming into communities and are most likely leasing from landlords. So nearly all of the ordinances did include some restrictions on landlords. The Hastings Ordinance is just a compilation of different city ordinances. It looks fairly closely at the South St. Paul and Matamidi ordinances. That's where a lot of the language came from. Although it wasn't exclusive, they came from different ordinances that were out there. So it's, again, a compilation trying to take the best of existing ordinances that are in place, keeping the ordinance clear so that it can be enforceable, and then also ensuring that all of the things we need in there to enforce the ordinance are in there for future use. Other communities tended to have what have sometimes been referred to as safety zones, or the distance from these protected properties where people can reside. those tended to be about 750 feet to a 2,000-foot distance. So that was left open in the initial draft of the ordinance for the committee's discussion, and ultimately the committee landed on the 750-foot distance from protected areas. The protected areas that are included in the Hastings Ordinance include schools, which is a broad definition of those for both non-public, public, secondary, high school, so a broad definition of schools, licensed child care centers, and public parks, which also was defined broadly to include things like the aquatic center, the civic center, recreation area, so that's a broad definition to which the distance requirements apply. The intent of the ordinance is to prevent these level 3 registered offenders from living within the distance from those protected areas. One item that came up that is not included in the Hastings ordinance but has been in other ordinances is to also include in that list places of worship that have regular education programs. So I'll point out that that is not something that is in the Hastings ordinance currently as it's drafted. So that is somewhat how the ordinance form came to be. The other question I was asked to comment on is why not just have an ordinance that completely bans these people from living in the city of Hastings? The premise with these ordinances is to provide protection under the city's police powers, the inherent power to keep people safe. And by doing that and referring to these specific locations, if this is ever challenged, I think we can point to the reasons why these rules are necessary to keep people safe. An outright ban on sex offenders in the city of Hastings is going to run into constitutional prohibitions, and I think we would have a problem enforcing the ordinance. None of the other city ordinances that we have reviewed have that outright prohibition. That also comes into effect with the distance requirements. If we applied too large of a distance requirement in Hastings, that would effectively be a ban and would have the effect of banning all of these folks. So what we wanted to, and what I think the committee wanted to do, have a very extensive distance requirement while still being able to say there are places within the city of Hastings that they're not completely banned from living in. So that's my comments on those two items. We can continue on as necessary there.
And that's all I have.
So what we're looking at there is a 750-foot ban. So is that all the gray area is where they would not be allowed, level 3 would not be allowed to live? Is that correct? I just want to make sure I'm looking at that map correctly.
Yeah, I know it's difficult to see, it's even difficult to see here, but the gray areas are, that just represents the residential areas and the blocks within the city. If you can see the yellow around the outside, there you go. The yellow is really the outer limits of everything that's forbidden for anybody to reside. Let's see here. There's a few white areas, and I'm trying to, if I have a pointer. Try this.
It's just a technical difficulty. That's okay. We can fix that.
Mayor?
We get that map back up there. And I think we also have a map here, right, Chief, down by you. And then, was there some copies of? Yeah, and we also have some handouts, so people are interested in looking at those, that map.
Yeah, these were copied, but here's, these are good maps if, I want to just pass them down.
Yeah. Thank you, Chief.
Mayor? Can I make a comment on your question? Because it appears
Sure.
that the white is the
Yeah,
outdoor.
the white areas is where it would be allowable.
Yep.
Right. The white areas is where it would be allowable, yeah. Okay. Thank you.
So if, I think the easiest way here, everybody see the white areas on the map? south of the city, southwest corner, and there are areas here in the northeast and southeast corners. So you can see wherever you see a white area is where currently these would be areas that would be permitted under the ordinance for offenders to live. And again, we point this map out, because this is ever changing. As of, this map was printed about a month ago, so we know that licensed daycares come and go in the city. So every time, if we have an offender coming to town, we have to review each and every one of these. So while this is the map and is our guide tonight, this is something that we will always have to check. You know, we get a constant list from the county of all the licensed daycares. We know where the schools are. We stay up on parochial schools, and you know, obviously our parks. I don't know, as we grow, maybe there'll be more parks too. So that gives you a general flavor. And I think if you do look at the sheets and you look at what the city attorney said, if you were to expand these lines any larger than 750 feet, these white areas would essentially disappear. And I think that goes to the city attorney's point that we have to be able to show that yes, constitutionally, there are places where offenders can live. And I'll point out one last piece, and that is keep in mind as well that when offenders are released, there's a whole set of restrictions that are assigned to them outside of what we're talking about tonight. And I think that was shared with some folks early on. So.
Thank you, Chief. Appreciate that. Okay. Now we'll be able to open up to the public hearing. I'm going to open up the public hearing. If you'd like to come up to the council and address the council, please give your name and address and give your testimony. I saw a hand back there. Please, sir, come on up. Just raise your hand if you'd like to speak. Please come to the podium. Welcome to the meeting. We're very glad to have you here.
I'm John Langenfeld and live over on 19th and Forest. And will this be held retroactively to the ones that are already living in Hastings? Will they have a period of time, 90, 120 days, or whatever, that they have to find a place to live in the acceptable zones?
Okay, I'll turn that over to our counselor.
The answer to that question is no. This is not retroactive. It would be effective as of, it's approximately a July, I have the date in here, June 19th is the date today, and then after publication is the date that it would be effective. So it would not be retroactive. That was intentional. That is obviously something that's been discussed about at length. I can tell you that I think it would be irresponsible for me to advise the city to consider that. I think that is something that would almost certainly result in the ordinance being found invalid. And that's the reason, so there is reason behind it. I also surveyed every ordinance that I found in the state of Minnesota and found no others that were retroactive.
Okay, and I'll just comment, I came here loaded for bear. I was gonna raise some hell, and I wanna thank you guys for putting this forward at whatever degree you can. It means a lot to, I think, everybody here without having to say so. It's a good thing, thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Thank you for those comments. Who else would like to be recognized? Please come to the podium. State your names and address, and welcome to the meeting. We're very glad to have you here.
Thank you. My name is Jill Schneider-Mose, and I live at 1590 Meadowview Trail in Hastings. I am a licensed psychologist and school administrator, and I'm 52 years old. I am speaking here to you tonight from the perspective of a victim of a home invasion that occurred a year and a half ago at my home on Meadowview Trail, where a male around the age of 21 years old tried to harm me, but by the grace of God, I got away. I share my story in support of the increase of distance that is recommended for this ordinance. I have two of my three children here, Julianne Mose and Jonathan Mose, to support this as well, as this has affected our whole family. I moved to Meadowview Trail 5 years ago, what I thought was a nice, quiet neighborhood. I did not know that I had just moved next door to a group home for juvenile sexual offenders. As a school administrator, I know and understand the laws that protect our juveniles. Many of the juveniles in this group home are repeat offenders. The foster parents at this home eventually walked away from the home due to fear of going to bed at night and let the home go into foreclosure due to the fear of the juvenile sex offenders in that home. About a year and a half ago in August, I noticed that someone had been in my bedroom and adjusted the shades in my bedroom. I asked all 3 of my college-age children if they had been in my bedroom. They all denied being in my room. A few days later, I was in my backyard and realized that there was a white male stalking me from behind some bushes. I finally yelled out to him that I could see him, and he came out and just stared at me and then walked away. I got a very good look at him, and he did not seem to care. I called a neighbor and told her about this scary incident, and then went into my home and locked all of my doors and turned out my lights, hoping to hide. My children were not expecting me to be, I was not expecting my children to be home until after midnight, as they were volunteering at a 4-H event. I thought I heard my children enter my home around 8 p.m. It was at this time that he entered my home through a garage door that I thought was always deadbolted, as we do not use that door, and he entered my shop area in the basement door, which I also thought was always deadbolted. He was in my house with me for about 2 hours, obviously waiting for me to get off the phone and go to bed. I found him standing in my living room, and due to both of us being caught off guard, I had a head start as he tried to grab me, and I was able to exit the home and get to a neighbor who called the police. My house was fingerprinted, and I was involved in a picture lineup at the police department of registered sexual offenders in his age range. At the time of this home evasion, I was informed by Hastings Police Department that we had over 100 registered sexual offenders in Hastings at that time. I had an alarm system installed in my house, and he did return to set that off, and it was an infrared 100-pound motion detector that I installed to protect my bedroom windows. The reason that I share this violent experience as a victim is to emphasize that due to close proximity of a group home for juvenile sexual offenders, which was next door to me, put me in a very vulnerable position of opportunity for a sexual predator. If an opportunity presents itself visually to a sexual predator, they are more likely to offend. As a licensed psychologist, I know the research on sexual offenders. I am begging you to pass this ordinance with a recommendation of protected zone of 1,500 feet. Brooklyn Center has a 2,000-foot restriction. The proposed ordinance is limited to schools, licensed child care facilities, and public parks. I am in support of the proposal to include places of worship. As the former Catholic school principal, we do have lots of programs for our students in worship areas. I'm also in support of not only including places of worship, but any sexually oriented businesses. Most, if not all, public places of worship in Hastings have religious education for minors on Sunday school, Wednesday night confirmation classes, etc. The Apple Valley Ordinance and the South St. Paul Ordinance have included places of worship and sexually oriented businesses within these prohibited areas. You were voted in to these positions to serve and protect all of the citizens of Hastings. I am begging you to pass this ordinance and protect our vulnerable children, our students, our young women, and even us older women. If it can happen to me, it can happen to anyone. I was just lucky enough to get away. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Okay, who's next? Who would also like to speak? Okay. Welcome to the meeting. Very glad to have you here. Give us your name and address, please.
I'm Anna Amy. I live at 1305 Hillside Street. And when I was looking at the map earlier today, I noticed, the 750 from schools. My one concern, or I have a couple concerns, but my first concern is for Hastings, for our middle school and our senior high, they walk to school for 1.5 miles. So in some of these areas, they're, open to walk by, and a sexual predator is welcome to live in that area. And the other thing that concerns me is 15th Street. There's a lot of area along 15th Street, which is a prime walking path. I don't know if you've ever gone, there's always people walking, and that's another white zone. So those are the two areas that really concern me, where there's a lot of activity and will be vulnerable to children and people out in the community.
Thank you for your testimony. Who else would like to testify? Feel free. Please, thank you. Appreciate it. Welcome to the meeting. Glad to have you here.
Thank you.
Your name?
I didn't really plan on speaking.
Well, that's
but,
okay. Sometimes those are the best speeches.
I'm Jackie Bauer, and I live in the President Streets area, and I just noticed that I'm in a white area, and I want to move. That's all I really have to say.
Thank you. Who else would like to testify? Anybody else would like to testify? Please. Thank you. Welcome to the meeting. Glad to have you here.
Thank you. I'm Andrea Coleman, and I live on Southview Court. And so we're just blocks away from the sexual offender who was placed there this spring. I have a couple of questions. The 750-foot buffer is lower than many of the cities that have already passed their ordinances at a much higher further distance. I want to know, how was that determined? And a comment was made after the last meeting that we have to have areas left open for these people to be able to come to our community. And if we added the places of worship, that the whole town would be blocked out. But I think that you have to look at the map. We are a community with lots of parks and lots of places for children to congregate. And this is the community we are. That's why most people have moved to this community. They have families. So I wouldn't be so worried about having a 750-foot buffer to make us more open for people to come here who may want to harm our families. I think it's most important to look at what's in the best interests of our families, our children, and our community. The fact that we have so many parks, we have so many of these places, speaks volumes about what the demographics are of this community. And I would ask that we would use common sense and reason when we propose these laws, and that we would, again, focus on the reason that you're all here is to protect your citizens. So I just ask, again, that 750-foot buffer be reconsidered to more like 1,500. And I also ask that places of worship as well be put back on there. I don't know if it was ever in this draft, but it is in other cities. Those are my recommendations and some things that I would like to be considered.
Thank you for your testimony. Appreciate that. Is there anyone else who'd like to testify? Anyone else? One more? Oh, please. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Michelle Murphy, and I don't live in the city of Hastings, but I work for the Minnesota Department of Corrections, and that's why I'm here tonight. I, too, have lived in communities where there have been level 3 offenders. I actually had one living just behind me. And what I found from my experience is that when the community I lived in had so much fear about this, he was actually my best neighbor. Not that that's the case all the time, but his house was always cleaned up, the trash was always taken out, the lawn was always immaculate, we didn't hear a peep, there were no calls for service. And so what I want to say about offenders living in your community is that, like the chief stated, you get to know about the level 3 offenders. And the purpose of these residency restrictions is to prohibit people who have already been identified as a high-risk offender from moving into certain areas. There are about 17,800 registered predatory offenders in the state of Minnesota. There are 387 level 3 offenders in the state of Minnesota subject to these broad public notifications, like the one that your city has had, well, actually the 2 that you have had in recent times. And so if you focus too much on those who are already identified, then you can be ignoring the threat, the real threat, to your loved ones and your families. And those are the people who have yet to be caught and convicted. Now, to the woman who spoke earlier about her victimization, I am so sorry that happened to you. That is a highly unusual situation to have a stranger, unknown to you, come into your residence and treat you in that fashion. And that's completely unacceptable, and I'm very, very sorry that that was your experience. That kind of experience could not have been prohibited unless he was a registered offender, who was a level 3 by a city ordinance. Okay, so I made some talking points to talk to you tonight to just think about these ideas. And it's not to say what will or will not be voted upon, but it's simply to just think about this in terms of the broader perspective. We know that there's no demonstrated relationship between the residential location of offenders and their proximity to places where children congregate or are found in larger numbers. There's been extensive research about that matter. The candy shop analogy is completely false. Those who offend against children normally develop a relationship through work, social or family connections, through school, through the church youth groups. When you think about all of the media articles published about sexual offending, and you read articles about children who have been victimized, which most people don't make a habit out of it, but I do that for my work. As one of the things is you'll see it's a relationship. When you think about the clergy abuse that was at the forefront of the Catholic Church and it caused a lot of anguish for a lot of families who were subjected to that kind of abuse, these were people who were known. There's doctors, there's teachers, there's lawyers, there are military individuals, there's a lot of families. And the chief showed you a slide that said that about 86% of the time offenders are known to the people they victimize. 2/3 of victims are under the age of 18. So again, when we're talking about enacting ordinances, we can be ignoring the threats to our loved ones because we're trying to identify people outside of our circle of trust. We're assigning risk to people outside of our circle of trust who have already been identified and they're being supervised by law enforcement, by the Department of Corrections, by the Department of Human Services. The idea of forcing registrants into areas where they will be out of sight, out of mind is the definition of false sense of security. Even if these offenders were intent on offending against children at places where children congregate, pushing them into more distant locations does nothing to alleviate the risk, and in fact is more likely to allow them to exist under the radar. What we know is that most of the time when people commit sexual offenses, they don't do it in their own backyards. They go somewhere else. Attempts to adopt local restrictions have been overturned by the courts throughout the country. State decisions on restrictions have been upheld in a number of court cases, though curtailed when attempts have been made to essentially bar all residential options for offenders. While so far Minnesota local ordinances have not been tested in court, it's only a matter of time before that happens. In the meantime, restrictions increase the difficulty and inefficiency of our sex offender monitoring system because, again, we're pushing them to areas where it's difficult for them to find housing opportunities. These individuals need to have a place to live. We know that offenders who have stability in their lives, when they have employment, when they have housing, when they have access to transportation, when they have access to resources like their families and the like, they're better able to control the offending patterns because they have the access to the resources they need to do so. So that stability really impacts the reoffense rates. Regardless of the public sentiment, there is no legal authority to adopt banishment laws, in fact or effect. And at some point, this will come up. It might not be in the city of Hastings. It might not be in any of the other 100 and some odd communities that currently have ordinances. But it will happen, and once that happens, the trickle-down will begin. And so I would encourage you to think about the ordinance itself. Is this something that you need in this community? You have 2 level 3 offenders who live here that you know about. You've had community meetings about them. You have information about them. Law enforcement knows where they are. The Department of Corrections knows where they are. They're supervised by them and, in another case, the Department of Human Services. The 750-foot buffer, I know that there's some concern about that as compared to a 2,000-foot buffer or a 1,500-foot buffer, which I heard mentioned here today. And I think that in terms of looking at a buffer zone, you made a good point, which is that you can't completely exclude someone from living in the community. And so you have thought about that as a whole, which is where could they live in the city of Hastings so that we're dancing the line of that constitutionality, but not in a way that is similar to the existing ordinances that you did review. So as a citizen of Minnesota, as a parent, as an employee of the Department of Corrections, I feel for all of you. I feel for my own self, because how can we think about keeping our kids safe and our community safe knowing that there are people who commit sexual offenses against others living amongst us? The reality is that they have always lived amongst us.
So that makes it okay?
It does not make it okay.
Oh my goodness. We're not a resident of Hastings, Minnesota.
Nobody is saying that
Everybody
this
has
is
a right
okay.
to speak.
Nobody is saying that this
Everybody
is okay.
she
What
has
I'm
the point.
saying is that in terms of the broad sex offender management that we are tasked with doing for the state of Minnesota, the Department of Corrections, local community corrections, the police department, the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, and the Department of Human Services, there has to be a way for us to effectively supervise offenders. And if there are so many restrictions that are put in place, there are offenders who then may decide to no longer register their information. That has happened in other states where they have enacted residency restrictions so that offenders were no longer able to be tracked. And that poses additional problems then. So I'm just encouraging you to think about this if you are going to enact it, or if you've already decided to enact this, some of the stipulations you may want to rethink as part of that. So thank you for your time.
Thank you for your testimony. Who would like to speak next? Who'd like to speak next? Welcome to the meeting. We're very glad to have you here. Give us your name and address, please.
My name is Laura Nitty. I reside at 1680 Tierney Drive here in Hastings. I'm sorry I'm not a very good public speaker. I wasn't planning on saying anything tonight, but
Welcome to the meeting.
my question is kind of to you council members. We all elected you into these positions to protect our community, like we are asking here. And I know a lot of you have family members, children especially. My question is, do you live within that 750-foot proposed radius? If you don't, are you willing to open your next door to a registered sex offender? You have many people here from the city of Hastings that are begging and pleading with you guys to increase the limits to 1,500 feet. I don't see one person, and I'm sorry, who lives in this city who is asking you to not pass a higher restriction. So please think about that when you make your decision.
Okay, thank you for your testimony. Who else would like to speak? Please. Welcome.
Name's Shala Hallberg. I live on 18th and Pleasant, and I am most definitely not a public speaker. I'm a mental health case manager for Ramsey County. I live in the city of Hastings. I work with offenders. I work with folk that have all sorts of serious and persistent mental illness. What I do know about the experiences that I've had is individuals who are, like one of the individuals that live in town who's civilly committed, there is a whole vast of individuals in that person's life that are overseeing just that civil commitment alone. I oversee people that are on civil commitment throughout the county of Ramsey County. We also have teams, my organization has teams here in Dakota. My concern and my question that I bring up is, what does this do to Cochrane? What does this do to our VA? And what does this do to our sober living of the individuals that come, from other counties, are transferred to detox, are having the services in those areas? What is this gonna do for them? Are they gonna be refused then to be able to come to Cochrane? Because Cochrane is right by a park.
Okay, thank you for your testimony. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak? Anyone else who would like to speak? Okay, please, sir. Thank you for being here. Welcome to the meeting.
Yeah, my name is Tony Hackert. I live at 48 Megan Drive in the Three Rivers Mobile Home Park, which according to your map is all the white zone, but it shouldn't be because there are 2 playgrounds there directly across the street from each other. And then question I had was, what is actually keeping an offender, say he's going out for a walk, what's actually keeping the offender out of the 750-foot zone? You know.
Counselor, did you want to address that?
Make sure I'm on here. Your Honor and council members, this ordinance applies to residency only, so it would prohibit level 3 sex offenders from living in these specific areas. It has no impact whatsoever on where offenders can walk or travel or be. So I think that's very important the public understand that this is tailored only for residency. It has no restrictions on their ability to walk within these areas or anywhere else in the city.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to give testimony? Anyone else? Okay. Anybody else? If not, I'll close the public hearing if there's no one else who would like to speak. And we'll have the discussion come here. Okay, please, come on. Welcome to the meeting. Okay. Thank you.
My name is Colleen Youngquist, and I live at 1041 Southview Drive. I live right around the corner from Mr. Wunderlich. He sits in his garage, and there is a kind of a reddish brown partition that the men in that group home have put up. He sits in that garage and he looks at people from around that partition. He watches the children walk by on the sidewalk. There is a family next door with, I believe it's a 3-year-old child. He sits on the upper balcony and he looks out over the fence and watches the child play. I am a retired employee of the Department of Corrections, and I understand what you talked about. However, I also ran the after-hours warrant process for the Department of Corrections at Oak Park Heights. And I've issued lots of warrants for level 3 sex offenders. I don't believe that, I know that there's all these surveys and there's all this data that you can look at. But if an ordinance with a 1,500-foot safe zone protects one child or one elderly woman or whatever, we may never know. If it passes, we may never know. But if it protects one child, whether or not we have obstacles and loopholes to jump through, I just don't understand not passing it, and I don't understand not having at least 1,500 feet. Thanks.
Thank you for your testimony. Okay, is there anyone else who'd like to testify? Doug? Welcome to the meeting. Glad to have you here.
I also wasn't planning on speaking tonight, but I thought urged or felt compelled
And
by
your
my
name
neighbor.
for the record, I'm sorry, Doug.
Yes,
Your name for the
Rolf Lalone, 1021 Southview Drive. I just came to listen to to support my neighbors here. I am in the white zone, but I don't have family that could be affected. But because of the neighbors and because of the passion that they have for this ordinance, I hope it's passed. I hope you can understand the reason why the people feel the way. They love their kids. They don't want to see anything happen to them. And this ordinance might lead to saving one child, as Colleen said. I think it's important to consider that. I know there's a lot of statistics out there. Some of the things that I've seen, show that a recidivism rate of between 12 and 18% for level 3s. It's pretty high, and that that because of a U.S. District Court ruling, there are going to be a lot of civilly committed offenders that are going to be released back to the communities. If we don't have some type of restriction out there, a lot of them we could become a fertile ground for those people. So hopefully you guys do the right thing.
Thank you for your testimony. Welcome to the meeting. Glad to have you here.
Thank you. I'm Janet Schultz. I live on Bolkin Drive, 545 Bolkin Drive. And I'm not in any of the zones, but I would like you to please consider putting churches on the restricted part, because speaking for myself, I go to the United Methodist Church on 15th, which is right across the street from Pioneer Park, and that place is busy with kids pretty much 7 days a week. And there's kids coming and going of all ages. They have all kinds of groups and things going on there, and so I just would ask you to include churches.
Thank you. Okay, is there anyone else who'd like to speak? Please. Okay. One more time. Okay.
I'm still me, but
Still, you're still you, for the record?
relatively speaking.
Okay.
But I don't think there's any naivety here that people are considering whether this is enacted or not, that it's going to make us safer. But it's going to keep Hastings from becoming a destination zone for these people to come into town. We know we're not safe. Nothing makes it safe. But as I spoke down here before, I worked 25 years in critical care, and I worked last 17 at Children's, and I'll get a little graphic at the stuff that I've seen. And I've seen kids with their insides ripped apart. I've seen teenagers come in with razor blades cutting themselves, including their genitals, from the aftermath of these monsters, what they've done to them. I've shut off life support equipment on children that have been brutalized. Their brains swell so bad, we had to put their skull plates in a freezer so their brain can go back down, and handing dying babies to their parents. So I have no sympathy for these guys. Whether it's 750 feet or 1,500 feet, we know we're not safe. But you have to do something. And it's not to make us safer or anything like this, to keep this city from being a destination zone. How many is an okay number? 2, 5, 10, 20? There is no okay number. Something has to be done. And I know you're going to do something, but the most you can do would be better than nothing. And aside from the studies and everything else, we know we're not safe. We never have been. I know crime in ratio to the population over the last 75 years has only gone up slightly. What's gone up is the interweb and people talking about the same crap all the time. On Facebook, on the news, we used to have 4 channels, now it's 400 channels on TV. So it sounds like a lot's going on. It's no more than it ever has been. But at least we're more aware. So I'd like to see, let's split the difference, make it 1,000 feet. But don't let the studies that say it doesn't make us any safer. That's not what it's about. Keep Hastings from being a destination zone.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Anyone else? Anyone else? Okay. Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing. Council, let's go to that item of business before us. And Councilmember Brock's chair of the committee.
Thank you, Mayor. And I just want to say thank you to everyone who's been engaged in this process. It's been a long process. And I want to just give a brief history of what the committee has done already so that we're all aware of what's happened. This issue started with a level 3 notification meeting in mid-February. And that was attended by all the members of the Public Safety Committee here of the council as listening participants. The mayor was also present at that meeting and promised the council would look at an ordinance and decide what would work best for Hastings. There was also an online petition signed by 900 people on the Petition 24 site. There is no verification of the signatures as people are able to sign and post anonymously, but despite that, the takeaway that we have is that there is a community discussion about the issue that was important, especially in the Southview and the Pine neighborhood where the most recent offender was placed. So the Public Safety Committee of the Council received the recommendation from the mayor to deal with the issue, dig into the facts, and then to propose a recommendation. We've had 2 committee meetings with time for public comment. The first committee meeting was to discuss the process and what information the committee would need to make a decision. That was on March 20th. The second meeting was on April 6th, and that was a discussion of the ordinance language, the provisions the committee liked and didn't like. We also extensively discussed the number of feet that would work in Hastings. This discussion is in the council packet. It is the April 16th meeting if you'd like to look for more specific notes. In this discussion about this ordinance, we operated with some basic underlying principles. Per the advice of the city attorney, we are not going to ban one person or group of people from living in Hastings. The state of Minnesota has said that this is unconstitutional. It's not fiscally or legally wise to draft such an ordinance, and it's also bad policy. We swore when we took our council office that we would protect and uphold the Constitution of the state of Minnesota, and that Constitution does cover all residents. There was a few provisions that we've struck from the ordinance. One was about a community participation in terms of offenders participating in community events. That language was removed. And we also had a suggestion that we should enforce this law ex post facto, which means that we would punish someone who had already moved in and force them to leave. As we've already discussed, the committee did not approve that language, and it's not a safe practice to draft retroactive laws for that very reason. It has serious consequences to an individual's rights, no matter who they are and what they've done. So at the second meeting, we spent a fair amount of time looking at the maps. We looked at how the ordinance would affect Hastings at 750, 1,000, 1,250, and 1,500 feet. And the committee's conclusion at that time was the only map that didn't completely cover the city was the 750 feet concentric circles, the map that we have today. And the underlying logic for why schools, parks, and licensed daycares are considered, first of all, parks and schools are considered public lands, which means they're owned by the city or the school district, and they're generally open to the public. So that is something we have jurisdiction over. Licensed daycares are also included because the state licenses them, so they're trackable. Many of the churches and city limits are already covered under the ordinance if they have a school or a daycare on site. So when you look at the map, a number of the churches are already covered, and so it is a bit redundant to include them separately. So at the end of the second meeting, the committee felt that we were fully informed on the issues. We had heard a fair amount of public comment and voted in favor of sending the ordinance to full council with a 750 feet barrier. And that's why we're here discussing it today. Many of you may or may not know that I have been a vocal not supporter of this law for several reasons, which I'm going to explain to you, not because I don't think that it has some value, but I think the underlying premise of the law is faulty. Regarding the distances, Hastings has 35 city parks which provide coverage even with the 750-foot requirement. A city like West St. Paul or South St. Paul that has 10 or 12 parks needs a higher range to cover more of the city. So they might even need to include additional institutions to make sure that the buffer zones are large enough to cover more with leaving small pockets. In Hastings, because we have the 35 parks, it provides a lot of coverage the way it was, and when we pushed out the boundaries, it was covering the whole entire city. The other point is just that Hastings, offenders can easily move. They can walk, they can drive, they can work in the community. And as the representative from the DOC said, the offenders rarely reoffend near their own residence. Not only are they highly monitored, but they also tend to reoffend with someone they actually know, over 86% of the time. And about 60% of the time, sexual offenses occur against minors in the minor's own home, which is a very sad fact. There's a widely publicized case in South St. Paul who has one of the strictest ordinances at 1,500 feet that was in the news recently in March, after a level 3 offender reoffended with an 11-year-old minor who he knew personally after he had moved in and after the city had enforced a residency restriction. So like John said earlier, we all understand and know that this ordinance is going to protect us solely, that we need to rely on other things and other methodologies to protect us. So what is the evidence for an ordinance? As our city attorney advised, based on his knowledge and experience, the value of this ordinance is to potentially make it tougher for the Department of Corrections to place other high-level offenders in Hastings. It is possible that this will deter placements, but it will not keep them out completely. And by creating pockets in the community where offenders can live, it is also possible that we could create concentrated neighborhoods where more offenders are living close to each other. That means specific neighborhoods have more opportunity to have offenders placed near them, and is that fair? Will that increase their likelihood of reoffense, being near other offenders? So I want to talk a little bit about what my thought process has been. I come from a legal background. I'm a graduate of the William Mitchell College of Law. And I have thought about this extensively. I've done a ton of research. I've talked to a lot of people, a lot of residents, a lot of professionals. I've read many studies. I've watched videos from child psychologists, and I've done everything I possibly can to inform myself on this issue. This is a very important conversation that we're having. And it's very logical that when the safety or security of our families is threatened, that we look for solutions. What can we do about it? How can we control our circumstances and keep our families safe? How will my city protect me from outside threats? And I totally understand that fear and reaction because I have 2 children of my own. And my kids roam all over the neighborhood and to neighboring houses all over the place. And I think it is important that we feel safe in our homes and that we preserve the safety of Hastings, because Hastings is a safe community. However, I think this ordinance is one of the least effective methods of minimizing threats to our children. We, the City of Hastings, and law enforcement cannot protect our residents from outside crime. We can't protect them from people with a pattern of behavior from recommitting a crime. The biggest weapons that I think that we have to fight evil acts are the power of community and strong parenting, which Hastings is great at. We have the obligation to band together and watch out for each other in our neighborhoods. We can teach our children about body awareness, physical boundaries, listening to the uh-oh feeling when something happens, and we can teach them about the language of consent and how to respect their body and others. And as I've done this research, there's a number of conversations that I've had with my children that I wouldn't have even thought to have. But the fact remains is that the biggest threat to our children and their safety comes within a child's own circle of family and friends. It is not strangers, and that is a very, very sad fact. But the biggest threat to a child is the predator who has not yet been caught and not the one living under a residency restriction. So here's what I feel my role is as a council person. From the beginning, my goal and objective has been to look at this issue with objectivity and diligence. It's also to have this discussion as a community and respond when our security and safety feel threatened. My goals have been 1, to listen, and 2, to point to the facts and to the data. And I fully empathize with the Southview neighborhood and what they've gone through as I sat in the community hearing notification meeting and I heard what people said. They were scared for their own safety. They were scared to go to bed at night. They were scared about who was living next door to them. And I do not take that for granted. But I feel that the Public Safety Committee has demonstrated an openness to hearing from all residents and has provided at least 3 opportunities for feedback. And now this issue is coming before the council for discussion, and so we, to this point, have done our job. The city has listened to our requests for data and maps. City staff has been very responsive in supporting the committee as we examine and evaluate the facts. And as the chair, I had a hand in influencing this ordinance, and even though I disagree with the premise, I have already voted in favor it once at the committee level to bring it here today. So I feel I've done my duty and fulfilled my responsibility with objective and diligence. But listening is not the same as agreeing. On this topic, informed by my legal education and experience, available data and evidence is guiding me to say what I feel is best for Hastings. and my professional legal background is one of the reasons I believe that I was elected to office. I was elected to lead Hastings, not to say yes to fear and misconception, but to do what I feel is right in my heart and for the future of Hastings. And I've heard people question the facts and the data, saying, well, the DOC has an interest. They need to place offenders, so of course they don't want it to be more difficult. And that's true, but what studies also suggest is that pushing offenders out of neighborhoods with residency ordinances pushes them to more rural areas and increases their homelessness, transiency, and instability. Instability and lack of community support are a major factor that make reoffenses happen. So from that information, it is logical that one could conclude this ordinance actually makes Hastings less safer if an offender is marginalized. So even if you don't want to listen to the DOC or you don't want to listen to the data, no one has presented any data from any source showing that residency restriction laws actually work. And by work, I mean they're actually effective at keeping children from getting hurt again. So we've been asked to consider this ordinance because it might have a chance of preventing offenses against one child or victim. But if we are concerned about what might work, how likely are we to be sued by our own state for violating constitutional rights and wasting tax dollars being wasted on lawsuits that we could have avoided? So throughout this process, my goal has been to evaluate a potential ordinance in 3 ways. What is its purpose? Can it accomplish its purpose? And is it consistent with reality and research? And 4, is it feasible and responsible, not a drain on city resources or time? Overall, this proposed ordinance does not meet the test for me. Number 1, has a purpose. There are 2 possible purposes for this ordinance. One purpose is there's a chance that it might keep more offenders out of our city and or slow the DOC placement of high-level offenders. The second possible purpose is that it would keep our children safer from sexual predators by keeping them from living in specific neighborhoods. The second criteria, does it accomplish its purpose? Is it effective? I don't like the idea of writing a law based on chance or hope. Yes, each individual person is extremely important because they're human, but there are populations of potential victims that this law doesn't even cover, like senior citizens or vulnerable adults. I definitely don't think that it will keep our children safer or prevent crimes against children from happening. The data in Minnesota and nationwide suggests that it will not prevent reoffenses because it's rare offenders commit crimes near their residence. And as far as feasibility and responsibility, it isn't a massive drain on city resources. Our law enforcement officers already know where all the offenders live, and so I don't really think it affects our city resources that much, so it would pass this part of the test. I want to continue that Hastings is a safe community for all of us to live, and I think there are issues like this upon which reasonable people can disagree. We can all consider the same problem of our safety, but come to totally different conclusions. There is no sex offender super PAC, state of Minnesota, or other advocacy group paying me campaign contributions to say this. I've received no additional income for being your city council person. Therefore, the only logical conclusion remaining is that I'm advocating for what I feel is right and wise, which is why you elected me. And I'm not saying that I won't vote for this ordinance. When it comes time to vote, I'm saying that it will not create a safer community for Hastings. Instead, it will open the city to potential lawsuit. And I want to be absolutely crystal clear with you on what it can and cannot accomplish. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Member. Discussion, Council? This is up for discussion. Discussion. Any further discussion? Councilmember Lund. Go ahead. Councilmember Folt. Did you have your hand up? Go
Thank
ahead.
you, Your Honor. And I would just like to thank Councilmember Brox for what she has said. The 3 of us who were on the Public Safety Committee were myself, she, and Councilmember Liefeld. And I have to agree with everything that Councilmember Brox just said. It was very well said. Thank you. You read my mind. And so I just want you to know that I support you fully. And I also support all of the residents who have come forward and have their concerns. And we're trying to do the absolute best we can. I just wanted to share with you real quick that this last week I went to Washington, D.C. with my 2 children, and we took the time to hit all the major museums, and of course we hit the National Archives. being kind of the history geek I am. And so we did visit, the Constitution and the Bill of Rights at the National Archives. And it moved me to take out the oath that we said as council members. I was just elected 5 months ago, and so I still have the frame. I'm so proud. I have it right above my desk. And it is the very first thing that we as council members take an oath to do is to uphold the Constitution of the United States. And so there are a number of other states who have already had it legally challenged since 2014. California, New York, Massachusetts, they've all had similar laws struck down by the state and federal judges on the basis of it being unconstitutional. Currently, there are battles in Illinois, Wisconsin, Louisiana, Alabama, Colorado, Nevada, and Ohio. And so I think that there is, and none of us here, not one of us support predatory offenders. Absolutely, please do not characterize any of us as such. But I feel strongly about being an American. I feel strongly about upholding the Constitution and all of the provisions that are within it that protect all of us. And so I take that role very seriously. And I would never, although it's a balancing act, because we can all agree that there are gray areas where we believe that the Constitution, maybe has some wiggle room, but I'm not going to wholeheartedly pass an ordinance in our city that completely flies in the face of the Constitution and that I would feel sick about as an American citizen doing that. So that's what I have to say. Thank you.
See, next is Councilmember Liefeld, then it'll be Councilmember Lund. Councilmember Liefeld.
Thank you, Your Honor. Like everyone else, this is an emotionally charged topic. I want to thank everyone who spoke, some personal friends of mine who spoke, some really hard things to hear, some statistics that are really hard to hear. So I just want to state that I really do believe that anything we can do to prevent or discourage, even slow down the process of having level 3 sex offenders move into our community, to me, we must do it as a protection of our community. If, as everyone has pointed out, thank you, statistically, if this does get overturned by the states as it's happening, in some states, not all, then we will join over 100 cities that have this ordinance overturned. We will not be standing alone as the one lone city with people looking back going, what on earth were they thinking? I feel, I had requested this list of peer communities, and I want to thank the staff for being so ridiculously prompt in getting that to us to see if 750 feet was enough. As Councilmember Brox had pointed out, we really studied that number hard. Came to the conclusion that 750 feet was the one number we could use that didn't put us in the bullseye of the Constitution by saying, we will not allow you to live here. Put one big circle on the city and say, guess what, you can't come. That's a bullseye. We didn't do that. And for the record, I live in a white zone. I'm a 49-year-old woman. I live in the zone of a highly rented area of townhomes. And I will tell you what happens in 6 months if someone moves into my neighborhood. I'll do exactly what I do today and what I do last year. I'm going to walk to their house, and I'm going to knock on their door, and I'm going to introduce myself. And I'm going to say, I'm here to help you succeed, because I need you to be a success in my community. That's what I need. I'm not afraid. I'm not going to be scared, and I'm not going to hide out. I am going to continue to lock my doors, check my windows. I do that today. I can't sleep if a window's open on the main floor. So those are some of the things I'm going to do. This ordinance, in my personal opinion, will not negatively affect or impact any member of our community or the businesses in the city of Hastings. There will be no downside as far as I'm concerned to this ordinance. I do want to state one thing as Councilmember Brox, and thank you so much for your information. I really appreciate your due diligence and all of the information you've provided to the council and to the Public Safety Committee. When you stated, when we hear, and not just Councilmember Brox, when we hear that there's no data to show that the residency restrictions work, we're never going to see that data. You're never going to see the report that says somebody who was coming to your community didn't and went elsewhere and offended. That is a statistic that is impossible for them to give to us. So if in our own minds I can say, you know what, this might work one time, I'm for it, because of the fact that I don't feel it negatively impacts anyone else. Again, as everyone has told you, thank you to the Minnesota Department of Corrections, Michelle, for coming and talking to us. You need to be diligent. This is not your excuse to leave your doors unlocked and let your children run rampant all over the place. It's not the society I grew up in. My children didn't run from Vermilion River over to Prescott on a bike like I did, unattended. I was doing that, don't tell my mother, who's passed away now, I was doing that at 10. I wasn't supposed to, but I was doing it. So I just want to say to you that your council, regardless of which direction each individual chooses to vote, I've worked with these people now for a number of months and have gotten to know them, and they are all exceptional human beings who want what's best for your families and our own families. But I will absolutely be supporting this restriction. If it saves one child, I'm fine with that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Vaughn.
Yeah, just one comment and a question for Mr. Fleagle. My first comment is, get to pick on our state here a little bit, because I think, look at the 100-plus cities of our colleagues that are going through the same meeting or already did. I kind of go, we need to talk to our state reps. I think that's encouraged everybody to do that. That's why we elected them, because I think we need to look at this a bigger picture, because it's causing anxiety in our community and 100-plus other ones in Minnesota. So I think going forward, we need to have everybody make sure you're talking to your state reps about the issue that's in front of us. My question for legal here is, when do we get to review this ordinance again? Hastings is going to grow. That's our goal. When do we get to take a look at reviewing this and reviewing maps and everything else that goes with it?
Council member, I think the city council can really review any of its ordinances at any time. I would assume that might start again with a committee action to initially review it, but there is no set time that you cannot review it within a specified time. It could be reviewed really at any time in the future.
Thank you, and just to follow up then, I appreciate everybody's work on that. It's great data, great input from everybody, and I think I'm fairly fully informed on this one. I think
You're becoming fully informed, Councilmember?
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Councilmember Fulch?
Just one other thing, Your Honor. I agreed with one of the last gentleman's comment about the mobile home community that's between 31st Street and Three Rivers there, Three Rivers Drive. Originally, when we looked at these maps, there was, I know that entire area had been within the no-go zone, where there had been there was a nursery, or there was a child care center, I should say, or something to that effect that was in there. And he had mentioned that there's parks in there, and I do believe he's correct. And so I would just ask that staff follow up and look at that one more time. I'm not sure how that area.
I think it's shaded.
Not on the final.
Go ahead, Melanie.
Mayor and council members, the map is, we will take a look at it. We will take a look at it and make sure that we're not missing anything. The map is for illustration purposes only, so when and if we are notified of a level 3 offender coming into town, we would actually use GIS to map it out. And I've worked with the chief on how we would do that. So it would be a much more precise measurement from there, but we will definitely verify the map.
Okay, let's put the motion before the floor first. We have a motion. Do we have a motion? Councilmember Lund makes a motion to approve the ordinance, second by Councilmember Vaughn. Well, first of all, I want to thank the committee. You guys did a heck of a job. There's a lot of testimony, a lot of information, a lot of thoughtful processes that went through that. Council members, I think each and every one of you have been very thoughtful and very deliberative. This is a difficult issue, and one of the things I look at when I look at this issue is sometimes as an elected official, sometimes you have to make a decision that's based on what you think is the absolute right thing to do, that may sometimes not go with what the public has to, what the public says. Sometimes as a public official, you think, well, maybe something's wrong with my thinking. Sometimes you go with what the public may deem as a better option. When I look at this particular issue here, and myself personally, I do not find much harm in adopting this for a couple of reasons. First of all, as Councilmember Liefeld said, if we can have a policy that's similar to our neighbors, Apple Valley and South St. Paul and Farmington, Rosemount, then I think we ought to put some skin in the game. And I think by doing that, it will lead to what Councilmember Vaughn had indicated. I do think we do need legislative action. And I think you're going to see this probably come before the legislature because they're going to start reacting to all these communities, because I know our friends at DLC are going to go to the legislature and say, hey, we got some real issues out there about how we're going to place these individuals, and it might be helpful if we can get some legislative action in this regard. I think the 750 feet I think is appropriate. The reason why I do think is appropriate, if I looked at the map here, and I've got it in front of me, just about all the churches are in it. The fact that we have 37 parks, I mean, I'm looking at it, and we can look at right here, you look at the white areas, we can all agree by an eye test that, 96 or 97, 95% of the city is covered. And I think that was our goal, that how can we, as a community, if we're going to draft an ordinance like this, be able to have an area that can meet the constitutional test and still have an ordinance of this type in place. And if we put I think even when we went to the 1,000, it was offered as a compromise, we're not have one white area in the city. Now, who wouldn't like not to have a white area in the city? I think we all would raise our hand and say, yeah, we don't want any white areas in our city. But that's not our charge as officials. That's not our charge, because all the other cities that have adopted these have had to have white areas too. And because of the topography and because of where things are laid out, I think there was a good point that what park, Councilmember Liefeld, did you mention, or Councilmember Brox, that one city had 10 parks? Well, we have 37. Well, no wonder they had to increase the footage. They wanted to make their circles bigger. And so when we look at the 750, and I look at that map and I see coverage in about 95% of the city, I'm willing to take that legal challenge and see what happens. And we can uphold our ordinance. And at the end of the day, that's what we want, because I think there is support among the community for the ordinance. And I think the people want an ordinance that will take the test of a court challenge. And we can be successful. When I first got involved with this at the hearing that we had last February, I said, we're going to try to get an ordinance together that's best for Hastings. And I thank the committee, by their thoughtful analysis, that they did that. That's what we have before us. And that's why I think it deserves our discussion and our support tonight. Now, we have a motion before the body. Is there any further discussion to the motion? I'm going to ask for a roll call vote. Okay? And so we know what the vote, so I don't have to try to figure it out by voice. The clerk will take the roll.
Councilmember Brox? No. Councilmember Lund?
Aye.
Councilmember Liefeld?
Aye.
Councilmember Fulch?
Aye.
Councilmember Vaughn?
Aye.
Mayor Hicks?
Aye. There being 5 yes, 1 no, the motion prevails and the ordinance is adopted. I want to compliment the audience tonight. This is a very emotional discussion. This is, it kind of rips the heart out, some of the testimony that we heard. I want to thank the DOC, Michelle, for being here, for everyone having an open mind, for everyone to be able to be civil and have a great discussion about this subject matter. And I'm very proud of our Hastings community tonight, and thank you for your participation. Thank you. And you want to stay for the rest of the meeting, you're welcome. Just give people a chance to clear. Okay, next is we're going to have a resolution regarding the public updated crosswalk policy. Ryan, welcome to the meeting. We're glad to have you here.
This is right next to it. There you go. Okay.
Put up the next program.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor, Council.
Okay. Thank you for being here tonight, and welcome to the meeting. Go ahead.
Thank you. Jumping right into it here, discussing the previous policy that we had for pavement markings in the city. Essentially, it was a 2007 resolution, and where there was about a paragraph of these bullet points of how we approached crosswalk requests in the city. Essentially, crosswalk markings were on collector streets only, adjacent to parks and schools, very high volume intersections, and at mid-block trail crossings. So that was it in a nutshell. Since 2007, there's been a lot of research done, manuals written, studies, best practices from our state, from our local research board, from our national partners, and kind of at the center of all that is our Minnesota manual on uniform traffic control devices. That manual is about a 6 to 8 inch thick manual that we use as engineers to make sure that the users of our public road system see an consistent experience throughout our state. So essentially that's kind of at the center of a lot of this pavement marking and traffic control that we do in the city. So not only did we take the comprehensive studies and pull those together, we looked at several peer communities, took their ordinance language, pulled it all together, and said, we need to have a complete updated policy for us to move forward with on crosswalk requests throughout the city. Additionally, there is Minnesota tort law that essentially gives us immunity as a city when these decisions come forward and we're able to document and go through a process that basically lays out our decision, either for or against. So there is another piece of tort law that we can use to our advantage when these requests come through. With the policy, it's important to keep in mind there is a couple state statute requirements or provisions under pedestrian safety. One is that at any intersection, whether we mark it with crosswalk or not, a motorist is required to yield the right-of-way to a pedestrian. Secondly, and conversely, if we're not at an intersection, the pedestrian is required to yield the right-of-way to the motorist. So a couple state statutes to keep in mind as we go through. The purpose for placing walkways is really to provide best practices to the staff and council to provide safe, accessible, and efficient travel for all modes of travel. To place crosswalks, with really 3 key points come with implementing that charge. And that's, we're looking for substantial conflict between vehicles and pedestrians. Secondly, we're looking for significant pedestrian concentrations. And thirdly, we're trying to give a place where pedestrians may be confused or may not otherwise recognize where to cross in a location. Coming from the Minnesota's best practices for bike and ped safety, a quote out of there is, marked crosswalks are less likely to work as effectively if they are overused or placed at locations with low demand for pedestrian activity. So we took that comment to heart as well through developing the policy. We're looking for a consistent application of this policy. We believe that's the best way to serve our public consistently. And then also, we want to place these devices where they will be most effective long term. I'm not going to go through all the general criteria. They're listed out in the policy that's attached in your packets, but a couple items there. I wanted to note that the policy applies to only roads under city jurisdiction. So county and state roads still follow and fall under their jurisdiction. That doesn't change. And then secondly, I wanted to call out, when we're doing traffic counts or pedestrian counts, that number of pedestrians that we're looking for to be significant is 20 pedestrians in any one given hour. So that could be 20 pedestrians a day at lunchtime. That could be a football event that just seasonally for one day has 20 pedestrians for that hour. So just wanted to let you know what's behind some of those numbers. Crosswalk locations, residential streets. Essentially, we should not normally require crosswalk markings on residential streets. Traffic volumes are low, speeds are posted low, and the vast majority of motorists are familiar with the area, and they expect to see pedestrians in the neighborhood on our local streets. Second location, mid-block. Mid-block crossings will be considered when pedestrian volume is high. And also, crossing activity should be expected in those locations. Again, trying to keep our roadways safe as well. One thing the policy brings into play here is a traffic study being required to satisfy several criteria in order for us to place that crosswalk in that location. And finally, major intersections. Again, major intersections continue to be a good practice to place and implement marked crosswalks, just because they're typically at controlled intersections, signalized, stopped, where we can control the motorists and bring speeds down and control those high volumes of pedestrians and give them a safe place to cross. There are exceptions to the policy, one of them being designated school walking routes. So we'll take special care in identifying those and placing those at the correct locations. Then also senior housing and healthcare facilities. Those were a couple additional pieces to keep in mind. Now, when we're looking at that 20 pedestrian per hour traffic movement, we do take the percentage of school children and senior housing and health care folks, and that number reduces. So if you have 50% of your traveling pedestrians that are kids, that number reduces down to 15. So there is a formula that takes that into account as well. Secondly, another exception, if a traffic engineering study is completed and it indicates that a problem can be addressed through engineering data with a crosswalk, that's something we will look at adding as an exception. And finally, the city has, if the city does identify a location that's desirable to cross and encourage crossing, that's something we would look at as well, depending on the destination point. Traffic study. A traffic study really is required to meet specific criteria and warrants before we place the crosswalk. This is actually a requirement in that manual I was talking about. It's something specifically written directly out of that manual for us to implement on Minnesota roadways. And then secondly, it's important to note that the level of detail of traffic study can vary. You know, you might hear that and go, oh my gosh, resources. But in some cases, the study can be short and more direct and succinct. Some cases it's going to be more complicated and it's going to take a little more time to do the study. So just want to let you know there's a range of study as well. Definitely not going to go through all these measures for us tonight, but it is important. We can't have a crosswalk discussion without knowing that there are additional measures to a crosswalk that can make crossing safe. I'll just point out one, if we look at a problem area, one of the things we do look at is reducing the width of the street or providing a bump out for pedestrians to shorten that time they're exposed to traffic. So things like that we can look at in engineering without just saying, we'll put a crosswalk in. Well, no, let's reduce the time somebody's crossing our public streets. So just wanted to point that out as an example. So how will new requests look in the city if a crosswalk comes forward? Well, a crosswalk request comes forward. First, they would be brought to the operations committee. So staff would take that request in, pull whatever preliminary data that we can, present that to our operations committee of the city council, and the committee will then at that point direct staff to either proceed with the traffic study or dismiss the request altogether depending on what the nature of the request is. Staff would then move forward, if requested, to do a traffic study and bring those results back to the committee. Ultimately, recommendations would come forward to the final answer being the city council. And with that, we have already, with this policy, come forward to our operations committee in late April. There was good discussion at that committee. The committee did bring a couple items there, one of which was adding the senior housing and healthcare facilities as exceptions. And so that is in the policy that has been accommodated. And really tonight we're here with a staff recommendation to adopt the resolution approving the policy on the installation of pedestrian crosswalks. So with that, Mary, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you for that presentation. I appreciate that very much. Council, this issue is now before us. What's your wish? Councilmember Lund.
Thank you, Your Honor. Question for you on city block length. I know we talked about this in our meetings, and I think the answer is there isn't a standard in pretty much any town that's this old, at least. But what would you say, just kind of your estimate, is our average block length? I'm specifically pointing to the mid-block crossing situation. So right now, the language has been modified to be 300 feet, which is really 600 feet, right? So I'm really wondering, is that going to be suitable for the majority of our blocks that we have?
Great question, Councilmember Lund. Yes, staff did do as best. The city does vary in certain areas, so it's a difficult challenge. But we looked at the highest percentage. We looked at our grid system, and it really was less than 500 feet. So it made a lot more sense to lower that number for the city of Hastings down to 300 feet, meaning we think a mid-block crossing is appropriate if you're less than that 300 feet. So we originally had it at 500 feet, but that didn't make a lot of sense because predominantly we're set up in a block grid system of less than that. So yes, good point. Thank you.
Councilmember Liefeld.
Thank you, Ryan. I learn so much every time you and Nick talk about our city that I didn't know we did, so you guys are fantastic. I too sit on the operations committee. I have a question. I've got many family friends, residents, some of whom are really, really safe drivers and don't understand the rules. Do we have any sort of a campaign that we might be doing, publications, any sort of way to educate our motorists? My only concern is that less crosswalks mean people don't stop. I hate to say it, a lot of people don't stop even with a crosswalk. So I want to know, is there something we can do to just educate that says, hey, just because it's not marked doesn't mean you don't stop, you know?
Right.
Is that an option? Is that something we can talk about in committee at a later time? Oh, we got to stand and help.
Yeah, thanks, Councilmember Liefeld. I do recall that discussion when we had the Operations Committee meeting a month and a half ago, and yeah, we can step up some social media outreach. I think we have a great opportunity to work with police department, probably on a seasonal basis for when pedestrian activity picks up in the spring, and then of course when kids are going back to school in the fall would be the two off the top of my head that I can think of where we would want to ramp that up and call more attention to it, remind people of what the statutes are and the expectations for motorists and pedestrians alike. As Ryan alluded to in his presentation, there's some statute language in there regarding, for lack of a better word, jaywalking, you know, and how that's an impact here. So certainly can do that.
Okay. Councilmember Brox.
Yes, I had a request from a resident regarding some sort of sign or crosswalk for Cannon Park. And so my understanding is if this passes, then we would evaluate that request against the criteria. And would that be referred to committee, or would you do the initial evaluation?
That would ultimately be referred to committee. First step would be to receive the request and do some preliminary data dumping on staff. Essentially, what can we grab easily through the request, and then ultimately send that through the ops committee for consideration of where do we go from there.
So
Correct.
This is just my heads up to the operations committee. You have one coming.
I'm going to piggyback on that, Councilmember. I've got one too for you. On a busy street next to a school at the end of a trail. So I think it looks like a good spot for one. Councilmember Vaughn.
I think it's all good input, and it raises up some awareness, and I like the campaign idea, but I'm worried about staff time too. If we're gonna look at any time someone calls, we're gonna send this through committee, operations committee gets, I think we should maybe take an effort to look at the time of the year that we look at it, because I heard Anna talk about schools, because they change the boundaries how far somebody has to walk. Maybe that's the trigger that says, okay, this is our time, people will get your requests in, we look at it as once going forward, because I'm assuming we only paint them certain times of the year, do installs. So I think I'd rather see a kind of a annual approach to say, this is our time that everybody gets to come in and we listen to it and we vet it through the process and then make some decisions.
Councilmember Lund?
Thank you, Your Honor. It's an excellent idea, and I think that's something that makes a lot of sense for efficiency and also for awareness, right? So we can help build awareness on our crosswalks and our crosswalk policy and safety overall by having a time that is dedicated to that rather than how do I do this? Who do I call? Because I've also received these. I believe we've received the same one that you're talking about there, but. Yeah, I think that's worthy of adding to this, and then also the campaign. I think we talked about something about maybe having some creativity around flags that move across the street too. So maybe we need to, when Joe's around, we need to get together and talk about that in our next meeting. Some creativity and some marketing that can raise more awareness than just the crosswalk as a solution. So.
Okay, I'll seek a motion. Need a motion to adopt to have the updated crosswalk policy. Councilmember Vaughn makes that motion, seconded by Councilmember Fulch. Motion is now before the body. Is there any further discussion? Councilmember Fulch.
Thank you, Your Honor. I agree with what was said as well. That was a great suggestion. I have a couple things. First of all, my son just went through driver's ed with legendary school administrator Vicki Davis as his teacher. And
She's mine, too.
I know, isn't he? Really?
Yeah.
That's such
Vicky's probably mad at me right now for saying that, but go ahead, Councilmember.
No. So Vicki pointed out to my son to tell you all that she was very concerned about the current crosswalks, how that they've faded dramatically, and that there needs to be some effort put into going back over and repainting the existing ones. And so I'm just passing that on from Vicki, and she knows her business, and she's going around, she's looking. And then the second item that I wanted to ask about, because I've brought this up in the past, particularly when the whole consideration came about increasing the speed on Vermillion and then down 316, and I had asked about what kind of crash data analysis was, occurring within the Public Works Department, looking at these intersections, and it sounded like that staff was really thin and didn't have the ability to be able to do this work very systematically, and furthermore, there was some question about data access. And so I do like the idea about making sure that it's done quarterly so that it's transparent as to when requests for crosswalks can come in. And a concern that has been arisen and still hasn't been answered specifically is about 316. As it just passes the ice rink there, it is a very, very, very busy segment, and there are no safe crossings, any pedestrian areas. There's a trail that ends right on, 31st Street, that dead ends on 316, where I have seen countless times in the summertime as I'm going to Red Wing, going to work, that there's kiddos trying to cross as cars are flying by there, and there's no safe place for them to go. And so it's my understanding staff were having some talks with MnDOT officials about how to look about redesign, and I would really love to hear, because I get stopped every so many weeks from folks that live in that neighborhood asking me what is going on, what are we going to do to provide safe pedestrian traffic through that area. And so I would really love to hear what the plans are moving forward. Thanks.
Yeah, I think Nick could address that.
Like Ryan's notes here. We have visited with MnDOT. It's been a couple of months, and they're very much in a preliminary mode right now for planning that 316 project, trying to determine the scope. We haven't reconnected on it. I don't think that they've gone too much further down the line. They've taken our comments as staff, one of which was pedestrian safety was a concern along the corridor, among some other things, as inputs to that. So there isn't much that I can report right now on where that's headed. The project is programmed for the early 2020s, so still a few years away before we'd really get into the intense design components of that one. And it is a MnDOT project too, so they will they'll return to us as they get the ball rolling a little bit further along with that. As for some traffic crash analysis you mentioned, we did look at that with developing this policy just to see where we're at in terms of incidents around town, and so we were able to pull a 10-year period of crash data for the city, 2006 to 2015. That's as recent as the state database goes for now. And predominantly where there were incidents involving pedestrians were at the concentrated locations along highways. That's where the cars are. That's where the most conflict potential takes place. So we saw very, very little for incidents on residential roads. A couple here and there on some collector streets, but overall no patterns forming on local city roads. Things that were, and there wasn't a whole lot of reoccurrence, period, on state highway system either. There might have been 2 here or 2 there over that length of time. Not to say that any are good, but just to give you a sense of kind of the trends, and they're pretty light around town. So it was positive in that we haven't seen anything for fatalities, pedestrian related, nor a whole lot in the way of serious injuries involved with that data either. So by and large, not a lot of incidents taking place from the data that we excuse me, that we have available. But those are things that we will continue to look to whenever a request comes forward through the process.
Just one last thing. I would ask that something be done sooner on 316 than 2020 when MnDOT's starting to get around to looking at it, because that's over 3 years out. You know, I realize it's a MnDOT road and that they have jurisdiction, but it just seems that, and this has been going on forever, you know, and it just seems like it's delay. And that whole area around the ice rink, but from the ice rink down to Colburn's, is just so unsafe. We're not doing the residents of that neighborhood any favors, and I can't tell you how many times I've wanted just to kind of stop and like help those kids get across the road there. And so I would just urge you to continue to push MnDOT, and if there's anything that the city can do to mark, especially where the road, 31st Street, comes across there over by the Burger King. It's just kind of ridiculous, and I would greatly appreciate it, and so would the residents of that neighborhood appreciate if something could be done sooner than later. There we go. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. I do know we have a letter in our possession that we have signed by them, by the Metro engineer, and we'll enforce that letter. So, thank you. Council, we have a motion. Councilmember Lund.
Yep. I'd like to make a motion on the motion, please, Your Honor.
We have a motion second. We have a motion second, yeah. So, did you want to speak to the motion?
I'd like to make a motion to the motion.
You want to make an amendment?
Amendment.
Okay.
Sorry. It's late, and I
State your
haven't been
amendment,
sleeping for
Councilman?
5 days. I would like to add some definity to our conversation about when we would actually review this. So my 2 cents is that we would have a time frame once per year. I think quarterly dilutes the impact of the message and makes it difficult to communicate it, you know. I think something along the lines of just before walking season starts, you know, let's say March, and we have a time frame where people can submit their requests, and then we review them at some point in March and I think that'll give good awareness to the walking season. Would that be acceptable?
Okay. Let me ask staff, Councilmember Lund was suggesting in March that we get requests and then probably start the process, but I do know we start painting in late spring, so we might want to up that up a little bit more.
You hit it on the head, Mayor Hicks. That would be a concern that we'd have as we're lining up our refreshing program a lot earlier in the year, getting everything set for that. So we'd want to try to make sure that.
How about January, submitting requests in
decisions are
January? Would
in
that work
alignment.
better?
It would be better. I think the overall goal we'd have is as soon as possible in the year that we can to get through those, with the caveat that we just want to align our repainting program development with whatever those decisions are. So perhaps we can shift the painting schedule a little bit too and gain some space there with that.
Melanie, did you have a statement?
Your Honor and Council, I think we understand what the council's desire is, so
I
allow
might
us.
have an idea in December and say, hey, put it on the January list or whatever.
Yeah,
So
allow
you
us
can
to-
do that probably throughout the year and say, okay, next time that we do talk about it, put it on the list, you know.
Yeah, we'll work out a timeline, understanding the communications priorities and the fact that the council wants to maybe align this on an annual basis. So we'll work on that and get back to you.
Okay. And as to your amendment, we can put it in here somewhere that it'll be an annual review or something like that, so it's in written language. Does that be okay? And then we understand what that timeline's gonna be? Okay, so we have a Lund amendment before the council to have an annual review. Is there a second to that amendment? Second by Councilmember Brock. Is there any discussion to the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor of the amendment say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. That amendment does prevail. Now we have the crosswalk policy installation of crosswalks as amended. That motion has been amended. Is there any further discussion to that motion as amended? If not, all those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion prevails. Thank you. Thank you, Brian. Okay, comments from the audience. Is there any comments from the audience this evening? Commissioner, we're glad to see you here. Make sure you give us your address now.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Mike Slavic. I am your Dakota County Commissioner for District 1, and I was actually here. My neighbors had requested on the previous issue just to show support, but I thought since I'm here and I stuck through the whole meeting, I would just give you a little bit of an update of a few things going on at the county board, particularly in relation to the city council and how we can work together. Tomorrow, the Dakota County Board of Commissioners will be considering a CTIB dissolution resolution. As you're well aware, and I've been able to send information throughout this past spring, the Dakota County Board, along with 4 other metro counties, have been in discussions on terminating the County Transit Improvement Board, which is the quarter-cent sales tax for the regional pot for transit throughout the metro area. And we did come to some resolution at the end of May, and as a result of that, tomorrow the board will be considering a resolution to dissolve. And by doing that, also in addition to that, we will be considering maintaining that same quarter-cent sales tax, but it would be exclusive to Dakota County as opposed to going into the regional pot. As you may recall, a year ago, the board took action to actually start to leave the board because of the 16+ million that is collected by the taxpayers of Dakota County. We were getting back about 30 to 40 cents on the dollar for our investment. And what we'll be able to do if it is enacted tomorrow, by October 1st, Dakota County will be keeping all 100% of that $16 million to be used for investments in transit and transportation to be used within Dakota County. And I just wanted to make you aware of that. I know that we've kept in contact via email in the last number of months on that, but that's a pretty significant for the county as well as for the city of Hastings. And it goes along with kind of a point that Councilmember Fulch had made. She had some issues with some of our MnDOT roads in the city, but we also have county roads in the system within the city. And I know that one of the things with these resources and with the partnership that we have thus far and continue to have is how we address that infrastructure that the county has within the city limits. And I know that from what I understand, the Public Works Director and our Transportation Director have been in discussions. We would really like to see some sort of a electeds and staff workshop this summer, if possible, directly for the city of Hastings, where we could go in and talk not only about the roads issues, but also transit within the community and see what the appetite is that now that there is some resources coming on. The Dakota County Regional Rail has really made it a priority, trying to figure out a way to support Hastings in its transportation system better than it has thus far. And I think I've shared with the mayor this past January, we had a very lengthy, almost hour conversation about transit within Hastings because of our jail system, because of the fact that we have congestion on Highway 55 heading out west, and how we possibly could do more. Councilmember Vaughn and myself serve on Red Rock, and as you're well aware that there's been some challenges that Red Rock, as it's being proposed now, is many, many years out, and that certainly puts the city of Hastings in a back burner. So how we could be able to partner better. So I look forward to it. I
would
hope
welcome that discussion.
yeah. And we would really hope that we could do that sooner than later to be able to have some discussion on how we can be even better partners.
Thank you for that, Commissioner. I'll
That's what I
look
have.
forward to those discussions.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else that'd like to speak to council tonight? Anyone else would like to speak? Okay. Council announcements. Are there any announcements? Okay. All right. I think we're all getting a little tired out here, and that's probably a good thing. I have a few announcements. First of all, what a wonderful month July is. Not only is it the birthday of the United States of America, but it's Tina and Mark's birthday coming up. Tina's is July 2nd, Councilmember Fulch, and Councilmember Vaughn, yours is on July 6th. Happy birthday, along with our nation. And you guys don't come near as long as how old of our country is, right? So that's a good thing. So, any comments on the birthdays coming up? Just be safe on those celebrations, okay? So happy birthday, council members. On Tuesday, June 20th, the HPC will be meeting at 7 p.m. at City Hall. On Wednesday, June 21st, the Finance Committee, chaired by Councilmember Vaughn with Balsanic and Brox, will meet at 6 p.m. to hear a presentation from the Dakota County Assessor and discuss the PACE, the Property Assessed Clean Energy Financing Program. And then also, the Planning Commission will be meeting at 7 p.m. at City Hall on Wednesday, June 21st. That's correct, the planning, it must be planning committee.
No, that's next.
Oh, it's, okay, that's what I thought. Strike the planning commission, let me get to that one later. The Monday, June 26th, now that might be a familiar day. The planning commission, the planning commission will be meeting at 7 p.m. at City Hall on that day. And the administrative committee, which is chaired by Brox with council members Fulch and Lund, will be meeting 7:30 a.m. on Monday, June 26th, to review the Leduc agreement with the Dakota County Historical Society. And then the Vermilion Corridor Coalition will hold its kickoff meeting from 6 to 7:30 at Hastings City Hall. On Tuesday, July 4th, of course, is our nation's birthday. City offices will be closed for Independence Day. On Monday, July 10th, the Planning Committee of the City Council, chaired by Councilmember Vaughn, Balsanic, and Fulch, will meet at 6 p.m. to discuss the Riverfront Renaissance Phase 3.1, the alley work, and the downtown parking. And then, let's see. Oh, just a reminder to everyone out there that because July 3rd falls on Monday, that would normally be a city council meeting day. But since I think a lot of people will be involved with the holiday activities for the weekend, and then the 4th of July being on a Tuesday, our next city council meeting will be on Monday, July 10th. And then 2 weeks later, on Monday, July 24th, in the month of July, the city council will be meeting on those days. And the planning commission, the alternate Mondays. And so therefore, our next city council meeting will be on July 10th at 7 p.m. here at City Hall. There's no further items before this body. A motion to adjourn is in order. Councilmember Liefeld makes a motion to adjourn, second by Councilmember Brox. That motion is a non-debatable motion. All those in favor of that motion say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion prevails, and we are adjourned. Thank you.